Hi there, listeners. Welcome back to Life in Motion. I'm your host, Grace Becker. I'm a licensed mental health therapist and an enthusiast of life. And I'm really excited to have everyone here today, especially with this semi-new setup. But yeah, my boyfriend, Jaden, he's in the Army, and one of his colleagues, one of his buddies who he works with, is really tech savvy with all of this, and he helped me figure out a new system for my audio, because remember I was talking about how I've been having audio struggles and sometimes recording struggles. So because I'm not great with that area, I provide the content, I provide the discussion. So I was really thankful for him to be able to come help me set this all up and figure it out, because this is going to be a learning curve for me. But yeah, how is everyone doing lately? I have been having such a random past week. As I'm recording this, it is currently Sunday, but on Friday when I was at work, I was in a session, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just felt so nauseous. And it was kind of one of those moments where I'm like, okay, if I don't do something really quick, or if I even continue to speak longer than 5 minutes, I'm going to hurl. And I was in a session with my client, and I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm like, can we end this early? I'm not feeling too good. And they left. They were so nice about it. But then I threw up afterwards, and I don't know why. I wasn't feeling sick at all before that. It was just the most random thing. And I felt kind of like I don't know if nauseous is the right word, but just uneasy, and my stomach kind of hurt for the rest of the day. But then I was okay on Saturday, so I looked it up. It could have been food poisoning or just a stomach flu. I'm thinking it's a stomach flu because I don't think I ate anything off that would have given me food poisoning. So yeah. And then last night it snowed. I live in the Midwest. I don't know who's all listening, where you all live. If you live somewhere warm, please send warm weather to us up here in Fargo. But last night I went to bed. And I was at my friend's house, and I brought sandals to go to her house. And then I woke up and it was snow on the ground, and I had to leave wearing my sandals in the snow. So, I'm ready for spring and summer, and the weather just doesn't want to cooperate with me. But yeah, that's how my week has been going. I'm excited for a new week ahead, just to get back in, hopefully a smooth groove with things. Hopefully the nausea is over, and hopefully that was the last snowfall, but we'll see. I'm really excited for today's topic. Today I'm going to be talking about a coping skill, and it's called radical acceptance. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because this is something that I have found myself talking about more and more lately with people in my life, with clients, with colleagues, with whoever. And I think it's just because a lot of people right now are dealing with some really shitty life circumstances. I don't know if any of you listening have ever struggled to accept some really shitty stuff that happens to you. I mean, no one is immune to horrible things happening to them. And whether it's something that's from the past that you're struggling to accept or to deal with, or it's something that you're currently facing, or it's even something that is yet to come, kind of giving you that anxiety, it can be really difficult to manage and accept things outside of your control that life loves to throw at us. So I thought it would be kind of a cool topic to talk about today, and hopefully all of you listening learn some ways to cope with some of the things life likes to throw. So getting into like a little bit more about what radical acceptance is. So radical acceptance is a concept from a therapy modality called Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, or Dialectical Behavior Therapy, DBT. It kind of has a couple different ways you could name it. And it helps people cope with distressing situations by fully acknowledging the reality of the situation, without resistance, without judgment, without denial, without all the things that you could, come to meet this situation with. And it doesn't mean that you approve of the situation. A lot of times when we talk about acceptance, a lot of people are resistant with it or judgmental of it or in denial with accepting a shitty situation because they believe that if you were to accept it, then that means you approve of it. But absolutely not. That is not the case at all. What it really means is you're just accepting that there are things in certain situations that you can't control, but there are also things that you can control. And it doesn't mean that you're okay with it, right? So one example is maybe someone you know was diagnosed with cancer, or maybe you failed an exam, or maybe you found out that your spouse was cheating on you. Wherever you're at in life and whatever difficult situation you're facing, we don't love those bad things that can happen to us. We don't necessarily approve of it, right? I would not approve of someone I know getting cancer. I would not be okay with losing my job. I would not be okay with my partner cheating on me. I don't accept those things, but I also can acknowledge that there's certain things about that I cannot change and that I cannot control. And what radical acceptance allows a person to do is it allows you to focus on how to move forward rather than staying stuck in the suffering. And one of the questions that, I often will ask my client, or is a good question to ask yourself, is why is radical acceptance important? And when we think about it, a lot of the times we resist reality. We don't want to accept that, we're losing our job. We don't want to accept that the person that we've been in a relationship with for years and years is cheating on us. We wish things were different, so we refuse the reality of them. And dwelling on those what ifs or what should be or what shouldn't be, those are some common things people like to say. It could create more emotional suffering, and it really just prolongs that suffering. And radical acceptance can help break that cycle by shifting the focus from what can't be changed to what can be controlled. So that's why I really love it. It does take a lot of mindfulness to do this. It takes a lot of cognitive, reframing and acknowledging both the shitty and the good of your situation. And there's roughly 4 key aspects that go into radical acceptance. And the first aspect is accepting reality as it is. So acknowledging the facts without minimizing or exaggerating them. Because a lot of times people, when they get into these situations, they tend to do one of the two, right? They will either exaggerate it. For example, if someone is currently struggling with the fact that, maybe they're single and everyone else around them is in a relationship. I know that can be very difficult, very isolating, very lonely. And in that type of a situation, you could exaggerate it by saying, oh, I'm going to be single forever. No one's ever going to love me. I'm never going to find my person. Right? Well, that's not a fact. We don't have evidence of that, right? But we also don't want to minimize it either. So in that same example, if everyone around you has partners and you don't, you also don't want to minimize the situation by saying like, oh, it's okay. Like if my friends leave me for their partners and I'm all alone all the time and, I don't ever have anybody like close to me to have that connection with, we don't have to minimize it either. We can accept things as they are. And something that you may have also heard me say multiple times is 2 things can exist at once. So your feelings can exist at the same time, and so can the facts of the situation. So using that same example of like the relationship one, you can both feel lonely or sad or frustrated and accept the fact that just because you aren't currently in a relationship doesn't mean you couldn't ever be in a relationship, doesn't mean you couldn't ever find your person, right? 2 things can exist at the same time. So we don't want to exaggerate, but we also don't want to minimize the reality of the situation. We want to see it for what it is. Yes, I am not in a relationship with anyone right now, and my friends are, and that feels lonely and that feels shitty. And you can acknowledge that. like I said, it's not about accepting these difficult things as okay, because it's not okay, right? If you want to have a partner, then you can have a partner. There's ways to like go about finding yourself a partner. But the second key aspect of radical acceptance is letting go of shoulds. And really you could change the shoulds to all sorts of language: should, shouldn't, what ifs, all those classic kind of wishful thinking phrases. And the reason we want to let go of those is because it kind of emphasizes on this false reality. When you say something like, oh, this shouldn't have happened, or I can't believe like they did this, if only I had said this, or if only they had done that, then what is happening is you're creating this judgment on yourself and on others. And that can be difficult to manage. That can prolong the suffering of an already very difficult situation. So instead of saying something like, this shouldn't have happened, try and shift that to, it has happened. Now, how can I respond? What can I do? One of the things that you maybe have heard a lot in your life is, well, you can't go back and turn the clock. You can't change the past, right? No sense. You can't control the future. No sense in worrying about it. But as corny as some of those things are, there is a lot of truth to them, such as, oh, well, you can't turn back the clock. Well, you can't turn back the clock. In other words, you can't change the past. Something has already been done. Something has already been said. You know, like this person has already cheated on you. You've already been given the diagnosis. You have already lost your job. You have already failed the test. You have already, whatever the case is. And right now I'm talking about negative experiences, but you can also apply this to positive experiences as well. It's just typically easier. Well, maybe not easier, but it's kind of a different story with a positive experience. Some people do struggle to accept good things that happen to them too. So maybe you get the job, or you get the girl, or you get the guy, or you come upon like this great thing of, like you came upon like $20 on the street, right? It can be something good too. And I will also hear people saying like, oh, that's just luck, right? They'll kind of use that dissociative, like disordered thinking type of just it's all luck or all or nothing kind of phenomenon as well. And that can be very challenging to and harmful to a person's mental health as well. Because again, we want to accept the facts without minimizing or exaggerating them, the good and the bad. And we want to also let go of language like should, shouldn't, what ifs, all those types of things. So we want to shift of this shouldn't have happened to it has happened. Now what can I do next? What's in my control next? Okay. The third key aspect to radical acceptance is understanding that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I really, really love that saying because it really helps put the world into perspective. Pain is a part of life. It's going to happen, whether it's physical pain through an illness or it's emotional pain, someone hurt you, a friend ditched you, or a coworker was gossiping about you. Pain is a part of life, but how we react to it determines if we will suffer. And if you continue to like ruminate and fixate on the thing, the horrible thing, or even the good thing, sometimes it can lead to suffering, right? But that's an optional choice that you can make. And I'm not saying that it's easy. It is very difficult to do this. It takes a lot of cognitive and emotional intelligence to be able to shift that mindset and ask yourself, okay, what can I do that's in my control to help this situation? It is absolutely hard to do that. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying this is going to be a walk in the park, but it is absolutely possible. It is absolutely possible. And it's possible through talking with a therapist. It's possible through journaling. It's possible through listening to this podcast and getting some tips on how to do it. the fourth key aspect, it kind of ties in all of these other ones, and that is focusing on what you can control. Because acceptance allows you to redirect your energy towards a more problem-solving, self-care, and emotional regulation type. Because people who like struggle to accept some shitty stuff that happens in life, right? When they prolong that suffering, typically they're people who struggle with, doing some solution-focused, problem-solving, idea brainstorming things. I know some people who they really love to kind of milk or stay in that victim mindset. And I'm not saying that it's not okay to acknowledge that you were hurt or this person hurt you or the situation is difficult, right? I think that's something that I hope that I've made clear in this podcast, because these things do happen and they're not okay. We're not accepting it. And also knowing that at some point we can't change the fact that they did happen. So what can we do to shift our focus to what we can control? Because acceptance, again, allows you to redirect that energy of that, whatever you want to call it, victim mindset or that suffering mindset to, okay, let's figure out some problem solving ideas. Let's make a good old fashioned pro and con list of our options. Let's do some self-care. And self-care looks different in many ways. A lot of times people think it's a luxurious thing. Oh, let's go have a bubble bath. Let's do a face mask. No, it can be, but it also looks like getting some sleep, going to your doctor visits, journaling, talking to a close friend or therapist. It looks like a lot of different things. And emotional regulation, which is a huge aspect to DBT alone. And you can calm your emotions through lots of techniques. What I usually recommend to people is to first try practicing a grounding technique or mindfulness technique, such as deep breathing. I know I've talked about box breathing before, and that's when you imagine like a a one-dimensional box, and you take 4 slow seconds of an inhale, and then you hold that for 4 slow seconds, and then you exhale for 4 slow seconds, and then you breathe as normal for 4 slow seconds, and you do it 4 times because there's, 4 sides of a box. So it's pretty easy to remember. And I can totally understand it may seem silly, like, okay, yeah, Grace, just breathe, whatever. But it really is very helpful. I have had clients shocked after I walk them through a skill like that on how much it helps them, because it really can help regulate your nervous system, kind of calm your body. There's all sorts of other things you could do too. You could do progressive muscle relaxation. And essentially what that is, it's like you can tighten up like certain parts of your body really like tight, like your shoulders or your fists or your arms and your legs. And then like slowly release it and even, kind of stretch it out a little bit, because our body holds a lot of what we feel. So if you can do some of these grounding techniques, you'll be better relaxed, more calm to then proceed with these more cognitive skills, such as the radical acceptance. And in turn, what you get is emotional regulation, which who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love some good old fashioned emotional regulation? So those are the 4 key aspects. I'll go through them once more. So 1, accepting reality as it is. 2, letting go of shoulds. 3, understanding that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. 4, focusing on what you can control. Okay, so we know kind of what goes into radical acceptance and a little bit of how to do it, but let's talk even more about how to practice this radical acceptance. So one of the first things you're going to want to do is you're going to acknowledge the reality. So identify what it is that you're currently resisting and actually kind of talk it out if you can. If you can do this out loud, in other words, more than just thinking it in your head, that can be tremendously helpful. I don't have the exact statistic. I could probably find it and leave it in my show notes. But like research has shown that when you get it out of your head, whether through words or through writing it, you are much more likely to process the distressing situation in a productive way. if that makes sense. So we want to acknowledge the reality. And again, not maximizing, not minimizing it. So I posted on my Instagram asking people if they could tell me some distressing things that they have gone through. And one of them was the relationship one. Another person talked about failing a job interview. So I'll kind of use that to tie into this, how to practice it, but you can really apply it to any situation. So acknowledge the reality. So identify what you're resisting and name it. So this person would say that, well, if we're doing it in a positive way, this is how you would do it. You would say, okay, well, I didn't really, prep that much, or maybe you did. Maybe you did prep, or maybe you didn't prep for the interview. You can name it, call it out, write it out. And you could then go throughout the day and how it proceeded while I went there. And I didn't really know where I was going because I didn't have the address prepared or pulled up. So I was running a little late. And then when I got there, I was really nervous about being late. So I stumbled over my words, and I'm feeling disappointed in this situation, and kind of just going through it. And again, acknowledging both your thoughts, your feelings, and the reality of the situation, because they can all exist at the same time. So just acknowledging what actually happened without resisting it. So how a person might resist this in this example is saying something like, oh, well, I wish I could have just done this differently. Or, I bet that they get people who get nervous like this all the time, right? So maximizing or minimizing it. Let's not do that. Let's just acknowledge what the reality is for what it is, right? And then what you want to do next is you want to remind yourself why acceptance is necessary, which I talked about at kind of the top of the episode. Fighting reality won't change it, but accepting it allows you to move forward, right? We can't alter reality. We can't alter things that have already been done or things that have already been said. We can't control another person, what they do or what they say. So in this case, this person who maybe failed their interview, you can't control what that interviewer's final decision is going to be. All you can do is accept the reality for the situation that it is, and then do the next best thing that's in your control. So then the third thing you're going to want to do when practicing radical acceptance is to use some of those mindfulness techniques that I was talking about earlier to stay present. So we want to focus on the here and the now instead of getting lost in those what ifs. So this is when you can practice the box breathing, when you could do progressive muscle relaxation, and then move into some of those more cognitive aspects like the cognitive reframing. So changing, well, what if they also were having an off day at this interview? The interviewer was also having an off day, and they contact me saying they want to give me another chance. Okay, what evidence do you have to support that that's actually what could happen or what's going to happen? You don't. So we want to change that what if or those shoulds or those shouldn'ts to, you know what? I didn't prepare as much as I could have. So next time I have an interview, I'm going to make sure I do something differently. I'm going to make sure I prepare. I'm going to look up the address beforehand so I'm not late. All those types of things. Right? And then what you're going to do next is you're going to practice. And this is a big one. This is a really big one because we really love to get down on ourselves. We really do. And we are our own worst critic. You've probably heard that a lot of times. And it's really true. Something that we do that, say, your best friend would do, you would treat your best friend with such kindness. If your best friend failed their interview, if they found out that their partner was cheating on them, or if they were single and all their friends were in a relationship, you would be so supportive of them and their feelings and their reality. You would say, yeah, that does sound kind of lonely. That does sound isolating. Or yeah, like, I'm sorry to hear that you failed your interview. That, I imagine, really sucks. It doesn't feel good. I bet that would cause some anxiety, right? You can do that for other people. So why do you struggle so much to do it for yourself? You're so deserving of the same compassion that you show other people. So be kind to yourself as you're processing these difficult emotions, because life is already difficult enough. We don't need to prolong the suffering, right? one of the last bits that you can do when practicing radical acceptance is engage in something called opposite action, which is another skill in DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. And what it does is, if your instinct is to resist, practice behaviors that align with acceptance. So you want to basically do the opposite of what your instincts are telling you to do. So one really popular example that I'm sure a lot of therapists like to use is people who smoke, right? So if your instinct, because you've been smoking for 10 years, what are you going to stop now? But maybe you're trying to quit, who knows? If your instinct when you get stressed or you get overwhelmed is to go light a cigarette, try and do the opposite. Practice behaviors that are the opposite of what you would normally do. And you can take it one small step at a time. It doesn't have to be a huge leap. So for example, a person who smokes, who maybe is trying to quit, if they're going to be practicing opposite action and say they're at work and there's all this paperwork piling up and they're just feeling the weight of the week on them and they have all these things they got to do and boom, like overwhelmed, stressed out. Maybe they start to kind of get a little head sweat going on. They're getting clammy. Their shoulders are getting tense and they want to reach for their cigarette. Maybe what they do instead is they practice a little bit of like stretching yoga, like a quick little like 5-minute thing instead to see if that helps relax them. Maybe instead of taking a walk outside to go smoke a cigarette, they take a walk around the block to come and back in and see if that helped them to relax and to de-stress. So just doing the opposite of what your instinct is telling you. And so in the example of radical acceptance, a lot of times, like I was saying at the top of the episode, people like to resist accepting shitty things in life, which is totally understandable. And that's also what can lead to the prolonged suffering. Not always, right? And you don't necessarily have to jump right into radical acceptance right after a shitty thing just happened. Have your feelings, make space for them, and acknowledge later on the situation for what it is. And you can practice that by journaling what's going on, talking about it, journaling like about what is actually happening and what you were thinking, what you were feeling in the moment, rather than journaling or talking about what you wish would have happened or what you wish you would have done. So I hope that makes sense. Basically just trying to go to do the opposite action. Just do the opposite action of what your instincts tell you to do. If it's going to help you, right? Because sometimes our instincts are good for us, right? They can keep us protected and, safe. So definitely not something that applies to every situation. It's not a universal coping skill. But I did also write down some times when it would be good to practice using radical acceptance that a lot of people don't always acknowledge is, oh, I can do that. So it's kind of my way of giving you permission of, yeah, of course, like you can accept and not be okay with that this situation occurred and move forward in a way that's not going to keep you stuck in suffering. So one of the first ones is coping with loss or grief. And this one can be controversial depending on the type of person you are. Because again, it's not saying, oh, I'm okay with my Aunt Susan dying. I'm okay with my child passing. I'm okay with, and you can grieve more than a death. You can grieve a loss of like an income. You can grieve a loss of, surrounding, like environment. People who move away from their homes for college, they can grieve, they can miss them. It can be really difficult. And again, it's not to say, oh, I'm okay with them dying, or, oh, I'm okay with moving miles or like countries away from my family. It's more so to say, okay, like this has happened. I can't go back. I can't change it. Like what's already been done has already been done. What can I do next? Right. And doing some of those other skills, like when I talked about how to practice radical acceptance, can make sure that you choose the option that is ultimately going to be the best for you. Because it can also be very easy to make split-second decisions in the heat of our heightened emotions. So, yeah. Another time when you can practice using radical acceptance is accepting past mistakes or regrets. Ooh, this can be a really big one for a lot of people. And it kind of goes to what I was saying earlier, that we are our own worst critics, that we can get really on ourselves for if we made a mistake or if we have regrets. Maybe you made the mistake of yelling at your child when they were, they weren't really doing anything. Maybe you called them a name. Maybe you even hit them. Maybe you were abusive, mental abuse, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, physically abusive, all these things. And you can't, again, really horrible. I do not advocate for abuse ever. Like, that is not okay. And if it's already happened, it's already happened. And that doesn't mean that it's a good thing. It doesn't mean that it's okay that it happened. But what are you going to do now about it? Are you going to sit in the suffering of, oh my God, I'm the worst parent ever. I just hit my kid, or I just yelled at them. I just called them a bitch. I just called them an asshole or whatever. Are you going to sit in that? And are you going to let that spiral and stay in the suffering and let it continue to affect not only you, but others around you? Or are you going to do something to challenge it and to hopefully change for the better? Right? Are you going to go do the therapy? Are you going to go do the group classes? Are you going to do the processing? Are you going to apologize? Are you going to seek, forgiveness from that other person if that's important to you? Accepting past mistakes or regrets. And one other thing to note too is just because you maybe do a bad thing doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. Everyone makes mistakes, where nobody is immune from ever making a mistake or having a regret. But just because you do one bad thing, that thing alone doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. It's what do you do about it after? Do you let that cycle continue and continue to do those horrible things? Or do you acknowledge it, change it, and do something about it? That's what defines you. Okay, for any of my Harry Potter fans out there, this quote, hopefully it will kind of strike a chord with you, because I'm always reminded of this quote when I say that. And it's when Dumbledore was talking to Harry Potter and he said to Harry, "It's our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are far more than our abilities." So this speaks to the idea that we are not defined by our past, our family, or even our talents, but by the decisions we make. So hopefully either me or the J.K. Rowling could get through to you on that one. Some other ones, just to kind of get through them, is dealing with unexpected life changes. This could be what I was talking about earlier, like a job loss, failing an interview, breakups, someone cheating on you, just really any big life change. And it could be, again, negative. It could be something more positive, because people do have difficulty sometimes accepting the good things that come to them. It could be, you could use radical acceptance when handling a difficult relationship. And that could be more than just a romantic. It could be with family. It could be with friends. Before you set a boundary, you have to accept that this person, the things that they have done, the things they have said can't be changed. And if they have made they've shown no evidence, no facts that they have put in effort to change, then that's when you can consider setting a boundary with them. And the last one, when you're using radical acceptance, is when you're trying to let go of resentment. Resentment can be a joy thief, because it kind of keeps us in that mental state of that victim or of that suffering mindset. And in order to let go of the resentment, we have to practice this radical acceptance and acknowledging what has happened to us, who was involved, what was said, how do we feel about it, and what can we do about it now? And also practicing some of those mindfulness things along the way. But yeah, I think that's really what I have for you all today. Radical acceptance is something that I personally love to practice using. It is challenging, and I'm a therapist, and I struggle to use it sometimes too. But I also understand that who likes to continuously feel like shit all the time? I certainly don't. So when something happens to me, or I am a part of something that is really difficult for me to accept, I make the time and I make the space for my thoughts and my feelings. And then I come to the point of, okay, what are the facts? What can't I control? What can I control? And I move forward from there. So I really hope that this was helpful for all of you as well. If you liked what you heard today, please leave a review down below, leave a comment, leave a like, leave 5 stars, share with your people. If you have someone in your life who's currently struggling right now and you think this is... Okay, Ben, I'm just gonna do my closing again because I was cut off. So, okay. But if you liked what you heard today, please leave a review, leave 5 stars, leave a like, leave a comment down below. If you know anybody in your life who's currently struggling to accept something in their life or is just struggling in general, feel free to send this their way and hopefully it'll be a help to them. But you can find me on my Instagram at life.in.motion24. My email is life.motion24@gmail.com. My TikTok is life_in_motion24. You can now watch in this very nice format. Shout out to Ben. You can watch this on YouTube, and you can also find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, really any podcast streaming site. But yeah, I upload a new episode every Thursday, so make sure to stay tuned in to hear all about life in motion. And until next week, embrace the chaos and find the beauty. Bye.